First, we're going to cover the drafting tools. So we are always defaulted into the line tool. The line tool is this first drafting tool up here. It's not lit up even though we are defaulted into it, but to begin drawing a line, you can look at your cursor and see it's a plus sign, and that tells me that I'm in the line tool, and I can begin drawing lines by simply left clicking, and it'll begin a line. If I right click right after I begin that first point, it'll just leave a point. If I left click and then continue left clicking, it'll draw a line, and it will continue drawing a line until I hit a right click, and then that will end my lines. If I want to close the shape, I begin left clicking, left click, left click, left click, and then if I want to connect here to snap to this, I'm holding my shift button, and now I can see the box pops up on my cursor and it allows me to snap to that point. When I left click, it'll still allow me to draw a line, but I want to end drawing this shape. So I'm going to right click, and then now I have a closed shape. We can see that these shapes are just one vector because it only has one vector arrow. So that tells me that all of these are connected. If I want to separate them, I can use this explode key. Now my explode is highlighted, and I can select the entity. This is command prompt up here. I don't have to use anything. It's just asking me, it's telling me what it wants. So right now it wants me to select drawings. So I'm going to left click on this drawing. Now I'm done selecting it. I'm going to right click, and now it breaks the entity up into multiple vectors. So now it's currently 4 vectors. I'll take the opportunity to point out on this toolbar that pretty much the first section, broken by this line here, is line tools. Then you have some editing tools, followed by, these are your snaps. The snaps are important. We pretty much stay on connected to drawing, which on a regular line, I would have to hold shift, and it allows me to snap to it and travel up, and then when I get close to a corner, it jerks me into the corner, letting me know I'm on that point. If I want to not be on the line and just connect just to the points, I can change my snap to just points. And now when I'm holding my shift, even though my cursor's on the line, it's going to take me to the closest point that cursor is. So if I'm close to this point, it'll grab that point. If I come over here a little bit and just scooch it, I'm still holding shift to remind you just the entire time I'm doing this on regular lines. But it'll allow me just to snap to the points only. Okay. This is to a tangent point. It's more about a circle and a line coming together to a tangent point. This is for perpendicular, so if you have a 90-degree area, it'll snap to that. This one is for intersection. Let's go ahead and select that one, and it'll select anywhere where 2 vectors come together and intersect. So if you have 2 lines that cross each other like a plus, there's no point in the middle where they cross. However, if I hold shift, it'll snap to that intersection. I also have snap to a middle point. So if I have this one and I come over and I want to snap, it'll only snap to the middle of each vector segment. If I have a circle to the quadrant points, I can go to draw, and let me draw a circle real quick with center and point, just to show you the snaps. And now I have my connect to quadrant points. It'll snap to the polars and the 45 degrees of the circle. And again, to remind you, I'm holding shift anytime I'm trying to snap to a regular line. We're going to cover references here in a second. And then this is connection to center, so if I have this one, it should, yeah, there it goes. So I have to move my cursor to the shape itself, and then it allows me to snap to the center of the circle. So even though I'm like moving my cursor, I'm like, I don't get a snap, move it to the shape. Boink, and see it snaps. So let's cover reference lines. Excuse me. I'm going to hit Control D to erase all the shapes on the current screen. I do not want to save these, so I'll say no. Now we have a clean screen. So our references, if I go to drawing, references, here's all the different kinds of references we can draw. I highly recommend to learn the hotkeys of the horizontal. In Italy, it's horizontal, so just leave horizontal without the H. So that's why Control-Alt-O. Vertical is still vertical in Italy, so we use the B. Control-Alt-O and V are the most popular ones. The next popular would be Control-B, which will draw up a vertical and horizontal line across your origin point down here. And on your particular saw table, it's in the middle of the table. We're utilizing the pictures for placement anyway, so the origin point isn't as important in this particular case because everything's already been set up and referenced off of the origin point, so it's really nothing the user has to worry about. So let's play with some of these reference lines. So if I do a horizontal one, my cursor is now a horizontal little line segment, and if I left click, it'll drop horizontal lines, and it will continue as long as I'm left clicking. If I want to right click to kick out of the tool, again you see my cursor turns back to a plus sign, and we're defaulted back into the line tool. I can go back up to drawing, references, and pick the vertical line now, and now see my cursor is a vertical, and I can drop vertical lines for as long as I'm left clicking, and then when I right click, it'll default back to the line tool. Drawing, references, incline reference line. So see my cursor is at an angle now, and it allows me to pick up here it says select reference. It's going to want 2 points to drop this particular reference line. One, and see now that's my fulcrum is the first point, and then the second point will be it's my pull point. So I can make an incline reference line. If I go back to drawing, references, and bisector reference line, Control-Alt-M. If I have 2 reference lines and I want a reference line to run parallel with those in the middle of them, and see my cursor is like this big arrow, it's like bisecting 2 references, kind of a cursor looking thing. So I'm going to left click this vertical line and I'll left click this one, and you can see it drops one in the middle. It'll also do it on the horizontals. And I mean, that's typically what it's used for, so you can drop reference lines down the middle of 2, and you can use that on regular lines or reference lines. So if I have, say, just 2 lines, let me offset it so it's perpendicular, or I'm sorry, parallel. And I want to bisector that, so I can go drawing, references, bisector reference line, and just pick the 2 regular lines and see it drops a. So it works, these commands work both on reference and regular lines, whether you're bisectoring, perpendicular, parallel. Let's see, so this base reference lines, that's a popular one. If I just simply click it, it drops reference lines on the origin point. When I have a screen full of references and I no longer want them, that's edit, erase, and in here it allows us to do, we can pick just entities. If you had measurements on the screen and erase the measurements, if you click that, it'll erase all the measurements. Same with font, and we also have an option for references. So when I click this, all my reference lines disappear. I'll hit Control-D to go ahead and just delete these little entities real quick. We'll continue on with the drafting tools. So I do have some shapes that we can draw, and we're going to utilize reference lines to kind of go through this exercise. So if I want to draw a rectangle or an edge rectangle, a circle, an ellipse top, or an ellipse, I can draw all of these shapes relatively easy. And if you want to do like a known shape, we're going to be utilizing the command prompt up here. The best way that I've found, since we're drawing in millimeters, is by putting in 25.4 times and leaving this in a formula form. And I'll show you what I mean here. So let me drop 2 reference lines. I'm going to drop one vertical and one horizontal. And I'm just putting them out here in this space. I'm going to offset this vertical to the left and offset the horizontal upwards, and I'm going to create 2 more lines to give me boundaries for a rectangle. Say I want this rectangle to be 120, let's say it's a slab, so 120 inches long. We're going to use our drawing offset. It's highlighted, and I simply left click the vertical reference line, and I move to the left because I want to offset it to the left. And when I left click again, boom, it drops a parallel vertical reference line 120 inches away. If I hit the equals key here, it will give me the answer. However, when you leave it in formula, it still treats it as, it utilizes the formula to make the move that you're looking for, which is nice. That way I can go up here and simply change my inch number. Let's say it's 70 inches tall. It keeps a whole lot of less keystrokes, because look, if I hit equals, it gives me the answer, 1778 millimeters, but I would have to re-input the formula over and over again. That's why it's a good tip to leave the formula. But I just wanted you to see the result. If you hit enter with that formula, it'll just erase it. There won't be anything in there. You have to use the equal. So let's go ahead and offset this, the 70 inches like we wanted. Now I have a slab size, and let's draw some shapes utilizing this. So if I go to draw, rectangle, simply, I don't have to use shift for snapping the references. I'm just moving my cursor up, and I'll put the snap back into connecting to drawing, so it'll cruise down the lines, and when it gets to the corners, boom, snap to that corner. So corner, drag it down. I'm not holding my mouse button. I just clicked one time, and I'm going to left click one time again. That gives me a rectangle. I can do the same thing with like an ellipse. See, I had a sink. Now I realize we're not going to have a sink that large, but you can draw a rectangle. Say it's a 12 by 14. Offset your reference lines. Go corner to corner with an ellipse, and you can draw an ellipse. You can also draw circles. You have multiple ways of doing that. The center and point is probably the most popular option, and I'll draw another vertical reference line right here to the side. A lot of times people will go 25.4 times and then say they want a 12-inch circle. Well, they're going to take 12-inch, which would be the diameter, divided by 2 and utilize the radius. So we're going to say 6 inches in this case. Use my offset. So we're going moving from the center of the circle out. So when I go draw, circle, center to point, and I zoom in here, I'm going to utilize this as my center. I'm going to left click. That's my center of the circle. I drag it out, and it snaps there. And I can check that measurement by going to video, points distance, and the hotkey for that is Control M. That's a very popular one for dimension checking. And when I utilize this, my cursor is now a drafting square. So I can go here to my snap. Since we got a circle, snap to my quadrant points. I can hold shift and it snaps to that quadrant point, to that quadrant point. I've got 304.8 mils. Now I want to know what that is in inches. So I'll go up here to the command prompt, go 304.8 divided by 25.4 equals, and we have 12 inches. So that's how we can double check our dimensions. We also have this little key here, measurements, and it allows us to do straight up horizontal, vertical. Oblique isn't going to be an angle. Let's just take a straight horizontal, and we still are snapped in our quadrants. So I'll snap to that quadrant, to that quadrant. It still was treating that as a points distance. So I right clicked out of it. Let me reinitialize this. Now see my cursor is this limbo bar looking thing. It was still in the points distance tool because this is the pop-up I was expecting. And when I click OK, now it gives me a dimension that I can pull here or up. And when I drop it, it gives me that dimension. This is good for drawings and printing out. I can go, if I don't want to look at the dimension any longer, it's simply edit, erase, and instead of references, I pick measurements, boink, and it gets rid of the measurement instead. So I can close this out. We also have other ways to draw circles. So like you can draw a circle using 2 points. 1, 2. You can utilize the circle making 3 points. 1, 2, 3. But and there'll be certain cases where you find where you'll need a 2 or a 3 point, but the majority of the time, the center to the outside will get you away with most cases. I just wanted to let you know, though, there are multiple methods. You can also go tangent points. When you're getting into more complex things like uneven bolt sinks and trying to draw stuff like that, that's when you would probably start messing around with things like that, because you're trying to make lines and arcs be tangent with each other. So that's pretty much like our basic shapes and how to get shapes in there. So let's continue back and get out of this top menu, revisit back with these buttons and play around with some of these things. So you do have the ability to draw an arc. So if you are going to draw an arc, you start with your line tool, so we're defaulted in the line, and then I would left click, and then my line begins. But this is where I'm going to come over and say a 3-point arc. Second point, third point, right click, so I can make an arc. I can also have a line, and I can, this is modify arc. So say I have a rectangle island, and I wanted one side to be an arc. Well, I can explode this, so I'll have 4 separate vectors. Now they're blown away. Now I want to bend this guy. Say I want to move him up 2 inches. Let me drop a reference. Trying to draw a reference line here. So Control Alt O for horizontal. Let's use our offset. Let's go 50 mil. It's just shy of 2 inch. I'm going to offset that line, and then I'll go Control Alt M for bisector, because I can go here to here, and it drops in the middle of those. Now I can go here to modify arc and click this line, and then just see it snap there, and boom, I got an arc on that side now. As far as arc making and stuff, pretty much it's the line tool and arcs. I mean, these other tools, arc with center, last point with arc, in the 20 years, I've never really had to mess with those things. Modify position, I think I cannot recall what that particular one is, but we got modify arc. This is an erase tool. That's simply, it wants you to select drawings, so I can left click, or I can window entities. And this also is a good point to explain the cursor. If I'm going to window in something, if I go from right to left and touch it, I can grab it. But if I go from, I'm deselecting. If I go from left to right, now my box is solid. That requires the entity to be in the box completely in order to select it. So if I'm just touching the circle per se, it will not grab it. It'll grab it if I go right to left and my cursor box is dotted. Now I'll grab it. So with the erase tool, after I'm done selecting drawings, you keep left clicking and keep selecting, and when you're done, that's when you right click, and it will initiate the erase tool to be able to, for all the shapes that you've selected. We have add a point on a drawing. So let's just say this island I made is a sink cutout. Let's put him back together by select and connect. I'm going to swing over him. I've got all my points selected, all my vectors selected that I want, and now I'm going to right click. Now he's a single entity. However, I would not want my lead in lead out to begin on a corner. I want it to begin in the middle of the side. That's where I would go here to add a point on a drawing. And just simply come here, and where I'm clicking, that's where it drops a point. And then it just asked me, hey, do you want to move that starting point? Yeah, I do. Boom, it automatically moves our starting point right there in the center. This is one of the cut tools. There's two of them. This cut tool is the point and cut. So this one here, wherever I point and left click, it cuts it. If I point here, left click, it cuts it. That's just point and cut. This is a move drawing. So it's kind of like the erase tool. You keep selecting entities till you're done. Then you right click. The difference is it wants a reference. Now the first reference is where you're grabbing it from. So I left click. And now if I start moving, I notice, well, I should have it. Let me try that. So I swoop over the entity. I'm done selecting, so I right click. Now I go left click. I think I got it. Yeah, I do.
This wasn't showing.
Let me pick a different, let me move this guy because he's not visually shown on the screen because he's a skinny guy. So I'm going to go back to move. Let's pick this guy. I'm done selecting, so I right click. Now, wherever I left click, so if I click here, I got him in the middle. If I click here on the corner, I got him on the corner. Let's grab him by the corner. Now I got him. You can see that guy.
Yep.
So I got him in the corner and say I wanted to move him to this intersection. Bam. A lot of times, like when you're doing sync placements, you figure out your center point, and then you figure out the center point, and you just simply move, grab it by the center point, and move it over the other center point. So this is invert the direction of the drawings. So this is for if I wanted my vector to go the other way. Instead of in a clockwise motion, maybe I wanted to go in a counterclockwise motion. I can simply left click on the entity and right click. Left click the entity, right click, see, it flips those entities the other way. On a line, I can select both of those, right click, flips it the other way. This button, it looks just like the move key. The only difference is it's going to leave the original drawing behind. So if I move this, it acts just like the move. If I move it, it leaves the original behind though. That's the only difference between move and copy. So we have change starting point. So let me make this a closed entity. So this will make sense. So let me get rid of this line. Clean up some of the references. Edit, erase references. So now I've got just this one entity on the screen. And say I don't want that starting point. I do want them on a corner, which will never happen. I just want to show you how to move this. If I say change starting point, it doesn't matter where I click on him, I just have to put the cursor on the shape, on the line. When I left click, he's going to travel in the direction that he's pointing. So since I have him pointed in the counterclockwise direction, as long as I keep left clicking, he's running around the racetrack. If I invert the direction of the drawing and make him face counterclockwise, and now I do the same, he travels around the track in a clockwise direction. Okay. This is rotate. We have two different kinds of rotates, as well as two different kinds of cuts. So this particular rotate is, let me just throw this guy off kilter. So say you have a shape off kilter and you want to throw him flat. So what I would do in this particular case is first draw a reference line. So I'm going to go Control Alt O, and I'll choose this corner here that I'm going to use that as my fulcrum, grab him here, and basically rotate him down flat. So I'm going to utilize this rotation tool. I left click him. It wants me to select the drawing. Let's grab him in his entirety, and I'm done selecting, so I'll right click. Now it's asking for reference number 1, which is going to be our fulcrum. I'm going to hold shift because I'm trying to grab that corner. So I got him, so left click. Now I'm going to grab him by the pull point. That's reference number 2 that it's asking for up here. So I hold shift, let snap, left click, now I got him. And see, he's rotating on that fulcrum that I picked as reference number 1. And I'm just simply, since that's a reference line, I can just bang him down and see it just snaps right to it.
And no shift.
Boom. No shift being held. And then I just simply left click and he's flat again. So that's how that rotate works. And since we're on this rotate, let's go ahead and I realize we're down here a little bit further, but the scale rotation matrix, it does a rotation as well. So this is for a particular angle. So if I want to say, hey, I want to rotate this 30 degrees up. So I'll pick scale rotation matrix. We'll select our item. I'm done selecting drawings, so I right click. Now it wants a reference. We're going to choose that same fulcrum. Left click there, and this time it throws a pop-up up. There's multiple things. You can scale, you can rotate, and you can matrix. So honestly, I never matrix, but I certainly scale and rotate on this screen. We'll cover scaling here in a second, which is all done here. However, at the very bottom, you got rotation angle. It has default quick key buttons, so if I wanted to go just straight 45 degrees, I can just click it, and it'll drop a 45 degrees in there. If I want a particular amount, like we're going to do 30 degrees, I can type what I want. So I want 30 degrees. And if you notice, it's going to rotate it in a clockwise direction. So knowing that I had picked this as my fulcrum point, and it's going to rotate in clockwise, I know he's going to rotate this way because we're going to rotate clockwise. So when I click OK, do I want to keep the original drawing? We're going to say no. And boom, see, he rotated clockwise from the fulcrum point, like a hand on the clock.
Yep.
So that's rotation. Okay, drawing offsets, that's the one next to that, and you're going to be using a whole heck of a lot of that. This is where you basically come up here and say how much you want to offset it by. You can offset lines, you can offset closed shape, you can offset reference lines. All these things can be offset. So you simply need to put your distance in there. Let's just put like a 12, like it's a half inch. Let's take this shape here. Let me rotate him down flat again, just so it looks nice on the screen. I'm going to go ahead and just rotate him back flat again. Boom. So if I had a sync per se, and like, hey, we need to open this guy up, or something of that nature, let's just use 12 millimeters so you can see the difference. And when I pick drawing offset, I can left click the shape, and then it's waiting for the new position. If I move my cursor to the inside of the shape and left click, it's going to offset to the inside. If I move it to the outside of the shape and left click, it's going to move it to the outside. So let's do it on the outside. Left click, you can see it offset that shape. 12 mil. If I came down here and I've got 12 and I pick this line, you can do it on reference lines too. Let me right click out of the tool. Sometimes it gets stuck in a tool. I just draw a line and erase it. That way I know I picked something else other than the offset. So let me go back to offset. I'm gonna pick this reference line. Left click it. Let's go up. See, it goes 12 mils down. If I pick them again and go down, it's 12 mils down. I can keep left click and then whatever side. Left click and whatever side. I can do it here and go to the inside shape and see it just keeps on picking. And we can just keep offsetting. You can change the amount you're going to offset. Let's say it's a 50. Then you can simply left click, offset at 50 now. Left click, direction, left click. And you can sit there and just keep changing your offset numbers up here, and then simply going back and offset, left click in the shape, and then just offset it how you need. This is a very, very, very useful tool, and you'll be using a lot of it. And it erase references. So we've pretty much covered the majority of these editing tools up in here. These are our snaps, and we've gone over these.
Yep.
So then the things that are important here is to select and connect. Let's just draw a rectangle. I know I've been utilizing it a little bit, but I just want to these are very helpful tools too. So a lot of times when you have a shape, it's closed, and we know it's closed because it's literally one vector arrow. And you could have a one vector arrow and an unclosed shape, but if you want to make sure it's closed, you could really zoom in there. But I'm pretty sure this particular piece is closed, especially since I just drew it with a rectangle tool. So select and connect and select and explode are like the opposites of each other. So to bust them apart and make these 4 individual vectors, let me get rid of this guy. And I'm going to use this explode. When I select him, he's highlighted, and it just wants me to select the drawing.
Yeah.
So I left click him, I'm done selecting, and when I right click it breaks him up.
Cool.
Select and connect is the opposite. You grab all the individual vectors that are touching each other, and when you're done, you right click and it snaps them all back together again.
Cool.
Scale rotation matrix. The other side of this that we utilize is the scale portion. So you pick it, select the drawing. When you're done, you right click. It needs a reference, so then I'm left clicking on the reference because it wants to know where to scale from. So if I want to make this thing twice as big, I can say 2. If I want to make it 200 times bigger, I say 200. If I want to make it half the size, I say 0.5. So let's make it half the size, okay? And it'll ask me if I want to keep the original drawing. Let me say yeah, just so you can see. So now you have a new entity that's half the size as the original entity.
And it's up a little bit because of where you selected the reference point.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if I did it again, pick that same shape, up, left click, right click, select the reference. Let's pick off this corner now. And then I'll do 0.5. Yes.
Makes perfect sense.
See? And
Yep.
then that was it, and
Yep.
it sucks it up into that. So it make it, once you see the visual of that, it makes
makes perfect sense.
Yes. So we have fillet. Whatever number you put up here is how large of millimeter of the fillet it's going to do. So if I've got like 50.8 for 2 inches, it's literally, you just pick the 2 sides of the corner. So pick that side, pick that side. Boom.
Cool.
Fillet's a corner. Cut and extend. These are like a brother and sister, just like select and connect. They do the opposites of each other. And the way these things work, so if you had 2 lines that were crossing, and say I want this line to end here, I don't need this tail to hang out here. We can cut him. So when I left click the cut, the first thing it wants me to select is the limit. Well, I'm not cutting this horizontal line, I want to cut this vertical line. So the limit is the horizontal because I'm not going to cut him.
Okay.
I'm utilizing him as the limit. Basically, he's the knife and he's going to cut this vertical line. So after I'm done selecting limits with my left click, I'll right click and I'll select the line that I actually want to cut. Left click that line and see it cuts him right on the limit that you had picked. So then I could erase that little leg and boom, he ends there. Now the extend is the opposite. So if I have a leg here and a leg floating out here, and now I want to extend the horizontal to the vertical, I'll utilize the vertical as the limit. So I'll go to extend, it wants a limit. So I want that line to go all the way to here. So here's my limit. I'm done picking limit, so I right click. Now which line do I want to extend? This one. And it extends to the limit. If you need to mirror image a piece, let me go ahead and draw a vertical and a horizontal line so you can kind of see this both ways. I'll go ahead and erase these extend examples and just bring this random shape over here close to the corner. So to see the mirror, say we want to mirror image this group, swoop over whatever you want to mirror image. So I'm done selecting, so I right click, and then it's going to need 2 points. I'm going to utilize the reference, this vertical line. I'll just pick somewhere out in outer space on that because that vertical reference line goes on and on forever. So I'll just pick up here, and then see I got them, and I can literally pick anywhere else on that vertical line as long as it's in the downward motion, and it'll throw them across, straight across from each other. If I do the same, like I'm still in the tool, I right click one time to jump out of the original reference point that I selected, and it'll allow me to select
the reference point, the first reference point again. So let me use the horizontal instead. I'm gonna click out here, and if I move to the right, it will mirror image up and down.
And then if I do it, I can keep the original drawing if I choose to. It's just a yes or no question. Do you want it or not? So these are the measurements. We kind of vaguely went over them. If you do a horizontal or vertical, it's good. If the line's crooked a little bit, it's just going to take the pure vertical or horizontal measurement. If you want the actual pure measurement of the angle,
Oblique.
then it's an oblique.
Okay.
You also have the option of doing like radius. You can do a diameter as well, like in a circle. So, you know, there's times that you need it. I don't find customers like using this a ton, but it's there when you need it. Then we have our 2D simulation that we utilize. We have our working list that we utilize to be able to dissect what we're about ready to send out to the machine. We have our cut manager. We do have a couple Easter eggs up here. And one of them was that points distance. And again, I highly recommend the Control M. There's only a few hotkeys I recommend. That's your horizontal and vertical reference lines. This points distance is one. Control D as in dog to delete, and then Control B to do base reference. If those are the only hotkeys you ever remember, it'll make a world of difference for you. You have something up here. Let's see, I think it's in Edit Divide. So there's no button for this particular one. The way this one works is if I have a line, I can go up here to prompt and say how many segments I want that line. Let's say I want it to be 6 segments. And I just go Edit, Divide, and I simply left click on the line I want to divide into 6 segments. And it just splits it into 6 equal segments. And there's some cases where that's definitely some handy stuff. I guess we can start getting into like if we're going to draw, make some drawings, because I've pretty much covered the majority of the CAD stuff.